Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Shadow Side with Safrianna. I am Safrianna Lughna, your host, and I am delighted to be joined by yet another wonderful guest, one of my dear friends, Xeres. Xeres, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you back. If you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. It's good to be coming back here again. I am Saris. Sorry for the phone tap. If anyone hears that, apologies.
No worries.
And the cat, but it's Saris. What I love to do or did is watching anime, or old movies that I'm not stick to. Um, Reading, journaling things aloud, going to community art events to support community-based art
Mm,
work. A lot of times, mostly either as an attendee or as a volunteer. Um, Nerding out, things I have special interest nerding out, like whether it is personal development or activism or cooking or just watching food shows like
I
so
love
that's
that.
nerd. Yeah, that's me personally. I am based in Los Angeles based, but serve clients everywhere. With mostly my spiritual direction and leadership development as at the moment. Uh, so that mostly supports people with owning their genius, owning their work, but for creating a life and work that works for them and that honors their journey of liberating their soul and themselves. So
Mm,
that is the focus of that, which is ancestrally rooted and culturally rooted. So that is like work, what I do for work. And but the other work is long work of community organizing. It's on top of my head because I work for so many things. Organizing small business in terms of accounting and marketing, mostly social media marketing when it wasn't even a thing. I was just
mhm.
like winging it to help people at then, just help with that. And the nonprofit organizational development back then. So that's where I bring in here now. And yes, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see all the community members again.
Yeah, thank you. And, just to speak to the importance of the work that you do, you know really this ancestral and culturally rooted piece is a lot of what I wanted to talk to you about today, because when I see you writing and sharing, it's very routed in this rootedness of humankind back through the generations, the ripples, the effect that we have backward and forward, and our stewardship of the planet, and all of that. So we're going to get into that today. But first of all, I just love that we have so many things to nerd out in common with. And I'd like to kind of go back a little bit here to one of the things that you brought up and just see if you could speak to it, because I feel like this is tied into what we're going to talk about today, which is community based art. So tell me a little bit more about community based art. Like, is that theater? Is that performance art? Is that galleries? Like, what does that look like when you connect into those kinds of events?
It's rooted in. I was introduced to a community-based art project, which is under a community development, or which is under a project under a community sponsorship through my professor of English at university, and he's one of the very few Asian American professors in back then what I thought was an inclusive Christian college, or it wasn't
Ugh.
situation. I know I was an English major, and I wasn't able to go because I didn't have a car to go downtown. It was called Tuesday Night Cafe under Tuesday Night Project, which was I just got a retreat about a week or 2 weeks ago for the Stafford training. I've been volunteered there for about over 10 years. But the origin is rooted in much deeper organizing that was part of like not the organization itself, but the story of civil rights, the story of
Mhm.
community of Little Tokyo, particularly, is one of the very few Japan towns that was here, one of the oldest Japan towns in the country, particularly the West Coast. One of them, I have to don't want to make like the most at this, but it's one of them, and it's facing at the time, due to things like the internment camps, the economic displacements, and ongoing. It's at the time that was there was always been community-based art for places, but that's rooted in social change, but also rooted in radical relating,
Mm.
and within social change and outside of those in the social change work, because started as like for Los Angeles for the Asian American community, who's back then this was like built like 27 years ago, which is like
Wow.
late 90s, early 2000s, by a group of people who saw that, wondering, how do we do art and then also social change in places
Mhm.
sustainably, because there were attempts that were great events to bring together, but doing it in what you expect like a full production is kind of hard to sustain without budget, and even without net budget, it was hard on a lot of people. So
Right.
how do we keep bringing those kind of communities together, and also I just say like that can revitalize cities, because a lot of them are like being disinvested, and if they're invested, it was to gentrify them rather than to
Mm.
rebuild them, rather to bring the generational back into the places, like, because it's usually like minority communities, and Little Tokyo was on that at the time, and a lot of like towns like China and places like similar are also disinvested at this
Mhm.
period. So it led to like, the short story is that it led to, let's how do we do like sustainably and keep it going for people to come and or to come together, and also a place where artists can experiment their work, and it's not just
Mhm.
one type of art, it's like multiple types of art, that can be
Wow.
displayed, and organization can be highlighted, like they were like thinking of as they were, it started just like, like, and at the time there was a church that's one of the older Japanese American churches, historically Japanese American churches, and some of the older Asian American churches, particularly American. But and the church itself is still alive today, but the building that they founded on is, yeah, it hasn't been used since multiple earthquakes.
Wow.
And it led to like part of a community development organization called Little Tokyo Center. Is and many were able to revitalize the building into an art center. And one day, founder Tracy, who is the founder of this, is like walking, trying to find a place to go in, like to have a free to low cost gathering for this kind of stuff, and then saw the courtyard
Wow.
of what's now hosting East West players, and it's like, and they were just finishing up. Oh, this is a court for people to hang out and for people to like, just wait outside, and stand and gather around while they're going to the theater or going to do something. And this is when we can repurpose this court into a public space, since this is going to be shared by many or the building organizations at the time, you know, which the three core ones are still sharing. So it led to, and now it's history, pretty much, and a
Wow.
karaoke machine, and that's history.
That's what a story. There's so much. I'm so glad I my intuition was like, we need to talk about this, because this does speak to the generational piece that we're talking about today. the topic Xeres and I picked was intergenerational healing. And this is it, right? Coming together in community and doing art together and finding solutions together despite the odds, right? Because you're talking about people of color, you're talking about minority populations, you're talking about people who don't have privileged status, literally, like the trauma of internment camps, of economic displacement, of judgment based on appearance alone, like all of these things that white people don't have to deal with. And that makes it harder for them to access both community and resource and all of these other things. So the healing in coming together to co-create this is incredible, and it's so cool that you got involved in it.
Yeah, that was who were friends with the founder and director, who were friends because his cousin was a part of it and was thrilled to be a part of it. Well, he's trying to help critical thinking and racial consciousness at school. That 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 even the mid '90s when he was there, it doubled down after Fred Bush got elected. It it went okay for a while. It didn't double down with all kinds of stuff. And when I came there, my class was the class of like radical change in that campus, which I'm a part of many ways. But then they doubled down. Like that's a whole nother episode. But that's a generational thing of him trying to hold it. And he's not the only person doing it. A lot of people, but then a lot of like most people of all races trying to, kind of pointed like if you want to be this place that's Christian scholar and want to be a reputable academic institution, including theological institution, like to be like incremental Christian school, but the way you're running isn't right with Christian values. It's basically nationalism.
Right.
Yeah, like you can't have always wanting to be a reputable theological school, which you do have reputable in our school, which is how we get this constructed, but also get funding from questionable
sources
as your
people,
as your donors and
yeah,
people. You can't have say, follow like the Jesus and of all ideologies and Christian ideologies, but also favor the other. Right?
Yeah.
The more, which is let's let the puritanical puritanical mentality of the school. Let's just be polite about that for the sake of involved. Like you can't say you for all Christianity, but
yeah, you can't.
You can't and get money and actually keeping the Title X protections, but you're like known as questionable think tanks as part of your donor base. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're bringing this up too, because this is part of the intergenerational healing. We have this fascinating place that we're at right now as a collective, as a country here in the United States, where we are seeing very damaging ideology run the show, and it's based off of intergenerational trauma. And it's power and control dynamics. I've talked about this in quite a few episodes recently, and I just keep repeating myself because it needs to be heard, that it's classic power and control dynamics. And white Christian people, Christian, I'm going to use quotes here, right? Christian people have predominantly been in power in the Western forces for thousands of years now. And it's damaged so many people, so many countries, so many peoples and cultures. And the ripple effect has come down the line where we've passed this very racial trauma from person to person and family to family and generation to generation, to the point where no one is immune to it. No one is not impacted or free from it.
Yeah.
But the people in power keep playing it out because they're so scared
Mm-hmm.
to lose their quote unquote power.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, this afraid to lose funding, or, it all goes back to the dollar signs. So how do we begin to work with this? I'm just curious, like, when you tune into your ancestral roots, when you tune into your wisdom that you bring forward,
Mm-hmm.
how does that flavor the activism you're doing now? What do you do to stand up against this? Because we all have to do our own little part. I'm curious, what do you see as your soul's calling to do with it?
That varies for a long time because, and that's coming to me is it's my generational healing didn't start to just back it up until my grandmother passed away, which is
Mm,
2014, and this was like at a very difficult time for the whole family, including my mother and I, and my sister, my mother and I. She was just also getting out of a difficult and complicated relationship that wasn't good for her. Not just talking about my stepdad or even my dad. My dad and her divorced amicably, and they're still friends.
mm,
But stepdad and her did not didn't go so good, which led to that, and it led to many things happened when like died, and situations where they're like, you know, things passed through, and it led to me writing a few series like about this 3 times, like different parts of my life.
mm,
That's where it began, and I was a bit an activist, but but that started, and then it started to with during after graduation from college, and by then like feeling very like deeply like just really with faith wise, like not like I don't fit in with these evangelicals at all, like that. It really started with coming back to, because much of what I inspired by is Catholic liberation theology, actually,
mm,
and queer Catholic that have really wrote many great things about, you know, queer liberation, queer love in the midst of a difficult of institution, shall I put it, like politically, and so that led to, I mean, going back to like Catholic faith of my parents, which I consciously was seeking. It was really, to be honest, understanding myself
mm,
and understanding who I am and who was, you know, and understanding what I'm feeling inside. Like this deconstitution of coming from where I was, and the reason why I'm here is because there were special ed support programs for me
mm-hmm,
as a because being autistic and a person called was kind of unheard of even back then, I and even in school there was no. I mean, it just wasn't. They're not apt to it, shall we say, and
right.
they don't. And even this doesn't that has better resources in California than back home, and the Harris did have money, didn't know school didn't completely know what to do with this gifted kid who's also needs special higher remedial training in order to get the which took fighting IAP, and I love fortunate I didn't have to go to like mostly speech therapy. I didn't have to go to therapy. I didn't have to go to like ABA or any of what is recommended. I just school. I mean, it's kind of unheard of, and even through that process, it's this. I had to work out like the the generational privilege that I've gained
Mm,
of wealth. Like it's not being wealthy, but it's at a stature from working class to one, but also being color and disabled in one,
Mhm.
and of a neurodivergency that no one heard of, that isn't to, especially even to those who are born like female side of birth, like any form that it's usually taken in men,
Right.
like in moist and
Mostly white boys are the ones that are diagnosed.
yes, that's and even diagnosis is tricky because then you get into sent to ABA camps, and it's insane to avoid all that's and
Yeah.
that's a big thing. And so I started with just activate as a way to process out loud because it just was interest to me, like this
Mhm.
sense of is important to me from the beginning, because I thought part of something bigger,
Mm.
like big, spiritually bigger at the time of that.
Yeah.
That's really a big part. But then as I got deeper to myself, not just like the kind of Catholic faith I could have been modeled, instead of either the traditionalist style that's usually known, usually gets known for, or evangelicalism. There's a lot of that led to that, and then that inquiry led to like like as I said, my grandmother's death, and the things that my mother had, and then even before that, the things that she had to do to, because she broke her hip,
Mhm.
and has to be taken care of here, and that's when I learned all the stuff, like the last 15 to 20 years, all the stuff of dealing with like our maternal side of the family and the complications and the
Mhm.
complicated relationships and the way my like um like henpecking and jealousy and financial abuse like affected our mother side of the family in many ways, and just it's that I don't always completely understand, that led to deeper inquiry within myself, and these got head to head when it turns out I have fibroids, which is the same that's related to both my mother's and my father's side,
Mm.
that I had to go surgery for, which I was a great OBGYN who was a surgeon that saved my mother's uterus years ago, and now I went to that person for that, which was 2018, and I was like, it didn't start with like that routine. It's kind of collided because it's like I always been like like this since I was a teenager. But
Mhm.
I think during the death of my mother, learning about things from the dysfunction of the family, the duality of like I can't stand the generational shit show dynamic
Mhm.
that's happening, but it's also a part of who I am, too, and it's kind of confusing, and it's how my mother and I were treated a certain way,
Mhm.
you know, but I can't put words on it, even though the faces, and then with the fibroid and surgery, and then months before the surgery, there were people suggesting things so to avoid it, which end up I have to think that this will not work out so well as much as because my fibroid is like size of a great ball, like a great ball. It wouldn't work, and it would numb my uterus rather than cutting it. So it's like, yeah, and that led to deeper like womb healing, deeper way of holistic lifestyle like ways, and then it just initiate me into deeper path of many things of now ancestral healing, now healing my sexuality, now that, but it's through that gave being able to speak out a deeper meaning, that it's not just so that I can fix the world. It is
Oh.
so that I am now doing it and keep doing it because I loved who I am, who I love the life of the world, and not marred by like feeling survival guilt or marred by
Mm-hmm.
just not knowing how to say what to do with all the way that systems are hurting people, and
Yeah.
and me hurting, and what the right disposition of life. And so now it's through that journey, now I'm seeing that I'm have to own what I started is not just as a now artist, but also known as a as a spiritual care support person, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't get to own because when you grow up in patriarchal Christianity, you're told you can't be a priest or a pastor. I was told that I was not meant to be your pastor when I told people out loud that, oh, I'm interested in it because I'm working with kids in high school, and some someone told me that, well, well, women can't. Mom says women can't be pastors. That led to early
Mm.
giving up.
Talk about generational trauma right there, right?
Yeah, like it's like now it's like I'm going to own the fact that to help some, for the lack of a better word, spiritual healing per se, but it's really reclaiming like the ancestral forces. When I learned about not just the Catholic reformist, but also learning about the Philippines, the medicine men and women that were in the Philippines, and the different governmental leadership,
Mm.
the Philippines, not just the Philippines, and different types of spiritual folk healers that are in the pre-colonial Philippines, not just the spiritual leadership head. Although I drawn to the spiritual leadership head for a reason in that, and learning that and how they survived, how they repurposed it in the midst of 500 years what happened, and how they're more than that too is, and I'm still learning to communicate people about this and owning it. That led to meeting people who are more into this than me, that I learned from all different. Most of them are from the global majority, not just Filipinas. That I learned the reclamation of not the ancestral leader, the ancestral the way of doing spiritual leadership, priesthood leadership. That's not just like acting as just like interfering in people's ability to connect with God, or which I've just been taught
Mm-hmm.
to do. And I thought this is the kind of thing I want to help on, that you could lead, but and the intermediary, but it's not at the expense of someone's direction. But God, you're here to help on behalf of the community, not just be someone's personal thing for you,
Right.
which comes very different when you really see the leadership when you as intermediary, that it's not so that you are doing the direct access for them. It is to support the destiny of the community, and to support the destiny of someone's soul and their contribution to community and their family line, not just only so that you have the ego of being the confessor and then the absolutionist. That's when I jive with
Yeah.
this kind of priestesshood. That's not like just like you're like the intermediary and then you're telling people what to do.
No, that makes sense. I'd never even thought of, like, I have thought of that, the piece of what the patriarchal colonial Christian stuff looks like, but the other side of it being, spiritual leadership, really guiding people and guiding communities as interconnected webs, not as a, you can't talk to God, you can't have this relationship, you can. And when you want to connect in with other people having this relationship, I facilitate that in community. I show up and help the people come together. That's really beautiful. So you said a lot of stuff in there that I just want to like really highlight, because there were some such important things in there that, my question was like, how do we even begin to approach this? And I love that your answer was essentially, you get to truly know yourself. You go in and you find all of the areas that are sticky and all of the parts of you that have been beaten down by society or ridiculed by others, bullied by yourself or others, and you get to know them, and there's justice and activism that comes out of knowing yourself, is what you said. And I was like, yes. And that, I love how you described it as the quote, deep inquiry into yourself, because when I think about a lot of the people that I've worked with over the years, a lot of the clients that I've had, the one thing that's definitely true that I found is that white men never really had to question themselves because they were just the dominant society. And so they never really had that deep inquiry into themselves unless they were also gay or trans or some, they, unless they were queer in some way, they never really questioned it. Whereas every queer person ever questions it. Every person of color questions it. Every assigned female at birth person questions, like, who am I and how do I show up in this world that's trying to put me in a box and make me a certain way, right? And so you said there's so many ways that the systems are hurting people, and it's the system trying to fit people into these tiny little boxes that's causing all that harm. So, thank you for all of that. I thought that was really, really brilliant.
Thank you. It's like not question, but it's also by design too, because you're not to know who you are and how you're impacting other people. It's easy to romanticize. I never had to know who you are, but there's a difference between, I would say, no, having that kind of confidence because you were told that who you are, you know, it is something you can evolve to. That there's that not because you're a blank slate, but because like you're given a chance to show who you are as you grow up, versus being told you are because like there's nothing wrong with you as a person. But it's not because they really think that, it's because it's like there's a golden child standard you're living up
Yep.
to,
And cog in the
you
wheel
know
standard.
which which is where I really don't envy that. Just as much I don't like to have to question myself all the time. I don't envy like them being so sure of themselves either. I don't, especially when that doesn't come from like being given a chance. It comes from like how I put this. It's like it's hard to put this because that can lead to a fragility, not just that where it's based on like external validation that isn't a real mirror, but it's just like telling you yes person all your life rather than an actual mirror that helps you look at yourself. And there's a reason why you have a yes person is because they want to control you. I mean, this is a that's I mean, I know this is seems random, but so in a way I don't envy that not have to question yourself. That's for more from a place of being put on a
Mm.
pedestal, because I wish people, if they want to not question themselves, is more from a place of like you're given like genuine love and genuine given a chance to prove yourself from a place of because you want to show
Yeah.
up and not because you're put on this pedestal. And I mean, in a way I don't envy, because that's like creates the most fragility.
And that in itself
you
is its
know
own trauma, right? That perpetuates this, like, I can't look deeper at myself. I can't question myself, because if I question myself, I'm going to have to unpack the entirety of who I am. And the trauma go it again,
yeah.
everybody's been impacted by it. It's just that the flavor of how it shows up and impacts us is different. And we have to be able to have nuanced conversations about how people are impacted by things in order to move through it. And yeah, the fragility piece is very, very hard to navigate, because it goes back to that power and control. If someone already has the power, they don't want to let go of it because they have this inside terror that that's going to mean they're left with nothing. Whereas the
That's
rest
really
of us
what.
are like, we'd just like to build community so everybody can have what they need and everybody can be taken care of. But there is this deep terror in the people in control that if they do that, they're going to be homeless or they're going to be the ones starving. And I can't understand the perpetuation of it personally, but I understand why it's there. And it takes, it's like we're doing the work, right? Saris and people like us are doing the work. A lot of women of color, a lot of queer people, a lot of just people who are in the margins are the ones doing so much of the brunt of the activism labor. And we need our white men to step the heck up. It's
Ah,
time. It's
yes.
time. And there's something that really it's a doozy of a statement, and I'm not going to say some of these words live right now, but
Mhm.
we need white men to be less afraid of being associated as being the queer F word, as we need them to be afraid of being associated with the, nationalist F word.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
rather
yeah,
you be like, yeah, I'd
yeah.
rather be a part of the queer community or associated with femininity than I would rather be associated with World War II Germany. Like,
Yeah, the
mm,
associated with the F word, the other F word
yes.
that's describing, and the other and another F word that's like perpetuator of daddy issues.
hmm
Like, would you want to be that, or do you want to be another person who would be perpetuating both mommy and daddy, colonial mommy and daddy issues to your own kids, to
Yep.
your own friends, and you're gonna be the like basically. Do you want to be free or be a puppet? Like that's really what the
Yep.
end of the day. Just because it's more comfortable to be a puppet, but with the delusion of being like strong man, whatever. Like
Exactly.
like that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, there are people that are going to love you, my friends. Like we need your help. We would love your help, and we're not going to cast you away.
No.
As long as you're showing up to do the work. So, as we come to the end of our time today, again, thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared. One of the things that really stuck out to me was like this grace of learning over time, that we get to learn and know about ourselves over time as life circumstances happen and we have a mirror brought up to us where we can look at how we're being impacted and what we need to do to liberate ourselves. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about intergenerational healing today?
Um, I think the generational healing is ongoing. That's the only thing. The and it's intentional and is where you are maturated into. That's what I want to always stress, because every person's starting point is different based on what came before your stand of your soul and what came before it, and what conditions are you in that you can utilize to move forward with yourself on that. So every step forward is a step forward. It doesn't have to look like a certain way or a certain way, because like things are complicated. These are complex, because you're not just the only one. You're dealing with like both the people alive you incident, and also what's before you, what things inspired that have you brought here, and it's complex.
Yeah.
Just own that complexity or simplicity depending on where your standing point, and just move forward towards it, towards radical relating, and move forward with that, because it is different for someone who's let's just say has that that has been through generational of more like come from family that lived like, you know, facing through famine or things like that, and now they're recuperating it and then recalibrating collectively if that family line lives through the family and lives through the thing than someone who is through morally war and then recuperating from that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and remember, a lot of these are ongoing, so you got, so they come from very different places. So do not ever, when it comes to generational healing in general, like compare yourself to others of of that that make it all about increasing your self-respect and the kind of relationships you want to have now that that amplify you as a person. So that should be the most important focus. An
Yeah.
outcome, you know,
Yeah.
regard and honor like like the totality of your family line and situation instead of comparing to someone else. Not, I know the culture will unconsciously pressure you to do that because that's part of like our dominant systems that get like you're not ahead, like, but generally like any pace forward towards honoring yourself and acclimatizing your lineages, acclimatizing and liberating your lineage is a step.
Yes.
It's a step no matter what. And don't, and you don't have, it doesn't have to look like someone else does. It doesn't have to look like me. It doesn't have to look like that. Because
Yeah.
you come from a different place than I am, or other people are. And that's not a bad thing. That's all, that's what I leave it with.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not a bad thing to be yourself and to honor yourself and to go at your pace. I love this, message of non-comparison, but really looking at your own unique circumstances and branching out from there and the grace of learning over time. So thank you again so much, Xeres, for coming on and talking with me about intergenerational healing. Always love our conversations. And until next time, my friends, if you want to talk to either of us about these kinds of conversations further, you can find Xeres online at the Estuary Moments. You can find me wherever you're watching or listening to this. And we are supporting you in doing this deep healing work and really stepping up into your next level, whatever that looks like. Anything, yes, as Sarah says, every step forward counts, every little piece counts. So go at your own pace and know that we're celebrating you and cheering you on. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor, and I'll probably share like ways to contact me in the comments after a few minutes after the
Absolutely.
show ends.
Absolutely. Please do that. All right. So until next time, my friends, let us know if there's anything you would like me to talk about here on the shadow side. And I will see you back here again next week for another episode. Bye for now.
Bye.